Probiotics. Everybody's heard of them. We all know they're good for us, but when you go to the store nowadays, there's about 9 million different options to choose from. So how do you make the right decision? So today in my video, I cover the 5 top recommendations that I have for people in terms of picking out the best probiotic supplement for you. Okay, let's dive right into looking at how to figure out what probiotic is going to work the best for you. So I want to start off by saying that probiotics, of course, are a supplement, and they are kind of a drop in the bucket in terms of how we can improve our gut flora, right? Those are all of the bacteria and sometimes natural yeasts that are growing in our intestines. There's over 100 trillion organisms in there, and I believe they weigh about 5 pounds. I've read 5 pounds and 7 pounds. So that's a lot, right? And that's good weight. That's weight that you don't mind having. Because they're so important for us. So again, probiotics really are there to supplement what you already have, or maybe you've had a health condition that's caused an imbalance in the flora over time for you. Something like maybe you got traveler's diarrhea at some point, maybe you've had some inflammatory bowel issues, maybe you've had urinary tract infections, anything like that. The probiotics are kind of, you want to get a medicinal grade, medicinal quality to kind of get you over the hump in terms of healing up that GI and into a better flora balance. But they are not going to make the biggest impact for you out of all the things that you could do for improving your GI flora and health. That really, as always, comes back to diet and lifestyle, which is much more effective. So we know that the different foods that we eat influence the different bacteria that grow. When we eat stuff that doesn't agree with us, we grow more pathogenic bacteria that's bad for our systems. And when we eat things that do agree with us and that have great fibers and starches, like a lot of vegetables and even fruits, those actually help support the good bacteria in the colon. So again, diet is really crucial and paramount. If you're thinking, oh, I'll just take some probiotics and I don't need to change anything, that'll be fine, you know, everything will resolve. That's probably not the case. Sometimes when they're really highly medicinal probiotics, they will shift your symptoms, but really it's at that core diet and lifestyle piece. If you're not shifting away from foods that are irritating and inflammatory with weird chemicals and byproducts and colorings and GMO stuff, you're not really going to get to the core of what's happening, and you're going to have the same issues become recurrent again. I also want to bring up too that I will kind of give you a couple probiotics that I really like personally for my patients. So, but I am in no way affiliated with these companies at all. They just happen to have products that I think work really well for a lot of people. So yeah, so this is coming from unbiased. I'm not involved with the companies in any way. I've just found them useful over the years. So again, yes, diet is number one, and then also beverages, of course, right? If we're drinking a lot of alcohol or sugary things, that's going to cause a lot of bacteria and even probably yeast to grow more than it should and kind of squelch out the bad or the good guys. So your GI is really all about real estate. So you've got a certain amount of area, right, which is a lot of area, which is why you have 5 to 7 pounds of bacteria in there. There's a lot of area to cover, but it's kind of this turf war that happens, right? And that's actually what happens when we get infections as well. I think there's this idea out there that, especially with antibiotics, and we take for strep, for instance, or staph, you know, that we completely squelch out that colony and it's just not there anymore and we're cured, right? And that's not true, actually. Most infections, bacterial things, come up from an imbalance of the flora itself. So what happens when we take antibiotics is that we end up decreasing that colony's growth. So we've decreased it back to a level where maybe those good guys can hang out, but unfortunately, usually the antibiotics decrease the good, the bad that's overgrown, and the good. And then sometimes if there isn't probiotics taken afterwards, the bad just regrow, and it causes this constant imbalance in our system. So it's important, yeah, to know that the bad isn't necessarily bad. A lot of times it's commensal flora or flora that we have. It just needs to be kept in check by the good guys. So that's why it's so important to eat foods that agree with you, you know, have some nice fermented products. And I did promise you guys a sauerkraut video. I swear that's coming. And probably a fermented foods video. Because again, that's another way to get this healthy flora in that I would prioritize over something like probiotics. Again, unless you have an active condition and you're talking to your physician, about maybe taking that, or your naturopath. Taking some probiotics. So the fermented foods are fantastic. They can be just as concentrated or more concentrated than the probiotics, and they often have a wider variety of strains, which I think is really important. We'll get a little bit into strains here as well, so I won't spoil that now. But yeah, so start with diet and fermented foods, and then if you still feel like you need a probiotic supplement, we're going to run through how to pick one out for you today. So let's dive in. So the first thing I have up here is CFU, or colony forming units. You see this written over on probiotic bottles all the time. And what does it mean, right? So CFUs stand for colony forming units. And this is a way that the companies kind of show you how many, it's not actually bacteria, which is a misnomer, how many bacteria are in the capsules, but how many little units in the capsules are viable to grow into a new bacterial colony. So the bacterial colony, depending on the species of bacteria, can be it can be 1 cell, it can be 10. So that's why it's important to know colony forming units doesn't necessarily equate to the number of bacteria in there. But colony forming units also mean they're talking about live cells that can form colonies. So we're not looking at inactive or dead probiotics when you see the colony forming units. So it is nice to look for a probiotic that specifies colony forming units. Most of them do out there nowadays, but it is a little bit of reassurance telling you that this company said, hey, we've tested this, these probiotics are live, we've seen them grow, this is the estimate that we think is in here for the colony forming units. So my magic number for the colony forming units is usually about 20 billion a day. There's been a lot of research come out showing that a good maintenance dose can be 20 billion a day. Sometimes people get by on 10 billion, and sometimes, again, if you have an active condition, you need a little bit more. And again, that's something to consult directly with your healthcare provider or nutritionist or whoever you're working with in that regard to see what concentration would be best for you. More is not always better. That's kind of interesting, where, we're kind of in the very baby stages of research with probiotics. And I think a lot of times, it's been pretty conservative, the doses that they've researched. But there's not a lot of research to show us that the 45 billion or the 100 billion are that much better than a 10 or 20 billion. And that being said, that's, again, totally individual. I have had several patients benefit quite a lot from doing a higher dose of the probiotics. And again, it depends on what's active in their system and what's going on. So again, I like to look for about 20 billion, which immediately eliminates a lot of probiotics on the shelf for you. And usually the concentration is one of the easiest things to see on the packaging because they want to make it sound really impressive, like 1 billion or 5 billion. And that's nothing, right? That's not nearly enough. And just to put this in perspective as well, we know yogurt has probiotics, which is great. Usually yogurt is around 5 million or so per container cultures. Whereas these probiotics I would recommend is 20 billion, right? So that's a difference of an M and a B. It's a big one. So yogurt is therapeutic. It's wonderful if you can handle dairy. It's wonderful on a daily basis to rebuild those cultures and has some really, really beneficial bacteria in there, including the lactobacillus and bifidus usually, which we'll talk about in a second here. So it can be really helpful, but again, if you need that kind of extra bump and you feel like you want to take a probiotic, usually yogurt is not just going to get it done. It's not quite enough. So now you know what colony forming units are. And between 10 and 20 billion, I'd say. I usually start with 20 billion for my patients if you can. And if you're worried because you're a little more sensitive, certainly start with a lower dose and then work up. It's easy. If you get caps, you can split the caps and then take half at a time. If you do that, you really just want to make sure you don't put it in anything hot, right? Because you want to keep the colonies stable, and the heat can kill and deactivate them. So if you're going to do that, it would be like mixing into water or drink or something cooling. Okay, so on to the strains of probiotics. So these are strains that you want to look for in your probiotic supplement usually. 90% of the time. Again, consult with your healthcare practitioner to see what's right for you. But I really like the lactobacillus and bifidus. And a lot of us have heard of the lactobacillus acidophilus. That's kind of the most common one. And then the bifidobacterium. But these are the genus. They have a lot of different species of each of these that are helpful. And these two strains are the ones that have been the most highly researched. So that's why we tend to recommend them. We know the most about them. These are the probiotics that all the benefits of probiotics that you've heard about with helping out eczema and psoriasis, decreasing allergies, increasing your immune system, decreasing inflammation in the GI, helping out the respiratory system, preventing UTIs or urinary tract infections. These are the guys that have been studied to show you that these are the ones that help the most with that. Now, that's not saying that others don't. We just don't have all the research on them yet. It's kind of slow and steady in the research world there. So my favorite way to look at probiotics is to make sure that they have the lactobacillus and the bifidus, but also that they have a number of other strains in them. Because if we think about it, our GI has a massively varied amount of strains, and we're just scratching the surface of what we actually know is in there and how it helps. So to me, getting the most variety of strains is a really good idea. Again, if you're sensitive, maybe just start with the lactobacillus and the bifidus, see how you do, and then kind of expand it from there. I also really like whole food based probiotics because I think they're a little bit easier on the system. And they tend to have a wider variety of strains, and I'll put a link to my favorite one in the credits down here, whatever they're called. Notes. So that's my theory with strains. There are probiotics that really just focus on the lactobacillus and bifidus, and that can be really appropriate for some people. But I also really like the idea of rotating probiotics if you're going to be on them for a long time to get these different cultures and strains. And again, this is where the superiority of fermented foods comes in, because it really does come up with a wider variety of strains and in natural ratios that we're used to because we've been eating fermented foods for millennia. So lactobacillus and bifidus, very important, not the end all be all, but really, really good ones to look for. And I'm going to throw in a little bonus for you guys at the end of the video, talking about my favorite travel probiotic because it's very different, and that distinctly does not have lactobacillus or bifidus in it for a couple reasons. So I'll get into that in just a little bit here. So another part of this is we want to make sure that the probiotics are allergen free. And this is a big one, that you can just read the back of the label to see if they list out gluten, dairy, soy, corn, those are the big ones, sugar-free, that type of thing. Because there are a lot of probiotics out there that are grown in mediums of milk. I know one that was grown in soy or had a soy capsule and had a patient react to it. So it's really important to make sure that they are allergen-free as much as possible for you. Especially if you know you're sensitive to dairy, don't get one that's based in dairy. I was doing a little research before the video, and I know Garden of Life probiotics are very, very popular. And it can be great if you're not dairy sensitive because they are grown from, I believe, goat's milk or cow's milk in that, and kefir. So maybe not appropriate if you're sensitive to dairy. And it is surprising, all the little additives, depending on the quality of your probiotic that you get. Like I said, the capsules can be made out of soy, they can have corn in it. Maltodextrin is a corn derivative that's a common thing that you find in capsules. So just be really careful, if you're trying to minimize inflammation and get foods out of your diet, that are irritating, just really try to get a very clean probiotic. Because it might not irritate you to the extent that you notice, but it definitely is adding to the inflammatory load that you have to deal with, which is kind of, it's counteractive to what we want to do here. I forgot to mention with the lactobacillus and bifidus. So a few things about what those probiotics do as well. And you can, with the lactobacillus acidophilus, right? We know acid is kind of part of it. So a really important thing with probiotics is that they keep the pH of the intestines a little bit more acidic, which is really important because we get bad bacteria coming into the system or through our GI tract maybe, that usually likes to live in a little bit more alkaline environment. So if we don't have enough of these good guys keeping the GI tract a little bit more acidic, the bad guys can overgrow and cause intestinal issues or diarrhea, something like that, right? So it's really important to keep those up. And then also what these guys do, what's really neat about these is that lactobacillus is specifically responsible for producing vitamin K in the colon as it ferments different food fibers. Vitamin K is super important for bone and brain health, among other things. So really great to have enough lactobacillus. And then these two together, when they ferment fiber in the colon, they produce what's called short chain fatty acids, which is really, really important for colon health and overall health. So with keeping these populations up, we're keeping the short chain fatty acid production up that keeps the colon healthy and functioning well. So another really important point for getting maybe the lactobacillus and bifidus in on a daily basis. And we're not really sure probiotic wise. This is another reason why it's good to do fermented foods, that are clearly they're whole food based. You're getting probiotics not isolated from the food. Is that we're not totally clear that these actually implant after we're young, which is why it's super important to really minimize antibiotic use if we can when we're young, especially with the bifidobacteria. There's been some research suggesting that whatever bifido is established in your system by the time you're 2 years old, that's what you've got for life. Those are your main colonies. So I had a colleague, I think, put it in a really nice way to think about it, where she was talking about, when we're taking probiotics, we think we might be adding to the colonies and regrowing the good, and we're not sure that's actually happening. She was talking about, imagine you're walking down a street, and all the houses are kind of broken down and in disarray, and that's a representation of your GI. If it's been not well cared for, not super flattering, but hang with me here, and that you are maybe looking for a house, right? You're searching, but you haven't actually moved into the neighborhood. So your presence doesn't actually improve the integrity of your surroundings, right? Does that make sense? I hope so. It's because you can't actually ask me right now. But so that's kind of synonymous with how we think the probiotics might be working as well. We do know that they improve all of these things with skin and immune system and GI function, all of that, but we don't actually know how well they colonize the GI tract at this point. Again, that's more research that needs to be done. It's really exciting, and hopefully we'll get a clear idea of that, and maybe some of the great probiotics that colonize better than others, or what the reasons are for that, and maybe we can figure out ways to get it to colonize a little bit better. So that's why with the probiotics, it's really, really good to do something daily. Again, maybe fermented foods and cleaning up the diet. Because we want to really encourage that good bacteria to grow, and the probiotic supplements do that, but it's not clear if they actually make it to the GI tract lining. Anyway, moving on to the fourth point here is getting probiotics that are refrigerated. So most of the higher quality probiotics you're going to see do require refrigeration. I realize that the shelf-stable ones are super convenient, and you probably remember to take them more often if they're sitting out on the counter than something that's refrigerated. However, a big part of keeping these colony-forming units alive and stable is to have them refrigerated. So, and usually that's when you get into those higher concentrations, like the 20 billion minimum. About the maximum I see shelf stable for CFUs is 10 billion. So to get those higher concentrations and more therapeutic probiotic, you really want to look in that refrigerated section. There are a few that are unrefrigerated, which is that travel probiotic that I'm going to tell you about, that can be shelf stable. And of course, you're not going to be able to keep it refrigerated while you're traveling. So it's really nice to have a shelf stable one. And this is a really important point that I wanted to bring up as well, because I think a lot of people, they get supplements on Amazon, right? And unfortunately, you've got Amazon's kind of a third party, and you never know how those probiotics have been handled or treated in the meantime. So that's the danger, right? If something gets delivered and Amazon just has it sitting on the shelf, and it should be refrigerated, you're effectively buying a probiotic that might be dead on arrival because it's been sitting out and it hasn't been refrigerated. So that's just a big caution that I wanted to kind of talk to you about with that. I know things are cheaper on Amazon. I know several supplement companies right now are working with Amazon to tell them proper storage practices to actually help resolve that issue. But right now it's kind of a free-for-all out there. So personally, I would really recommend getting the probiotics directly from the manufacturer if you don't have any health food stores locally. Getting them from your naturopath or nutritionist. And then also there are a few online websites that I do trust that are supplement stores that I know handle the probiotics well. And if you're ever concerned and you have a favorite supplement, website to go to, you can always give them a call and ask them how do they handle that? Are the probiotics refrigerated immediately once they're delivered from the company, or what's going on? What are their standard practices there? That's just a nice way to protect yourself, for actually getting a product that's viable. So yeah, hopefully all that will shift and it will be really easy for everybody to get high quality refrigerated probiotics that have stayed refrigerated. But it's just a good thing to think about the next time you're thinking about ordering things online. And again, I'll put a couple links to that in the notes here about who I trust, and then feel free to do your own research, and I'm sure you'll find ones that I'm not familiar with out there. And then, of course, price is our fifth point. So usually with probiotics, you get what you pay for. And I know that it can be a little bit of sticker shock when you're looking at probiotics and be like, oh my God, $60 for a bottle of probiotics. But it's true. Usually high quality stuff is about $1 a pill. That's kind of how it goes across the board for supplements in general. But you get into this higher price point when they're refrigerated and when they have a higher CFU. So it is something to notice. Those are the more medicinal ones. So it does depend on your goals at that point, right? Are you just taking a traveling one that's kind of low potency just to kind of keep your immune system up? Do you have something actively going on that you're really looking for a medicinal probiotic? So price is usually an indicator of quality. Not always, but something to be aware of. And I think that's why a lot of people will, maybe just not ever try refrigerated probiotics because they tend to be the more expensive ones. But again, super necessary if you want some great cultures that are live and helpful that way. Okay. Great. Okay, so that's my 5 points. I hope that was helpful and informative for maybe being able to read through labels a little bit better in these probiotics and know exactly kind of what they're doing and what you might want. There are definitely probiotics out there that are specific for women's health, because these probiotics not only line our GI tract, they line our nasal tract, our throat, esophagus, respiratory system, urinary system, and vaginal tract in women. So those strains, are great, I think, for if you're looking specifically for a women's probiotic to support vaginal tract health. Usually there are a few strains that have been researched to help with that specifically. Now when we get into some of the more marketing terms with kids and seniors and all of that to me, and maybe I'm just not familiar with the research, but that to me has not been differentiated out, that there are actually strains that are better if you're over 65. Kids usually want to keep things pretty simple. Yeah, these rules that I'm talking about usually apply to kids too, but not with the colony forming units. They don't usually need 20 billion a day. They're usually a lot less concentrated, and they're just fine. So so I would like to jump into my favorite travel probiotic, and I wish I had an example here, but I am out right now, unfortunately, but I will put a link to it in the bottom. So it's called Florastor, and Florastor is actually not bacteria, which is interesting. It's a yeast. So what's great about the yeast is that it is shelf stable, so you don't have to worry about refrigerating it. And it's specifically wonderful in that you can take it while you're taking antibiotics, and it's not going to interfere with the antibiotics, and it's still going to help restore some flora. So that's exciting. So if you're traveling, worst case scenario is that you know, maybe you don't have anything with you, or you get really sick and you feel like you need to take antibiotics, you can take this probiotic very safely with it. And FloraStore is at that 10 billion mark, which is nice. It's a little more concentrated than most shelf-stable probiotics that I like. And it also does similar things in the GI in terms of helping produce short-chain fatty acids. So it's a really wonderful one to have on hand. And depending on what's going on, your healthcare practitioner might recommend that type of yeast anyway, which sounds weird to want to take a yeast, right? But yeast is not bad. It's part of our normal flora. And the specific type of yeast in FloraStore, the S. boyardii, is actually really, really helpful in a lot of GI conditions. So you might already be familiar with it. But yeah, FloraStore is a fantastic option for a non-refrigerated probiotic while you're traveling. Yeah, and it comes in, I think it's measured in micrograms of yeast rather than the colony forming units. So that's a little bit different, but don't be alarmed. It's a good product. And again, no affiliation. I'm not getting kickbacks for promoting their item, but it is a great product. So, okay, great. Well, I think that's it for today. Thank you again so much for watching. Feel free to leave me any thoughts or comments in the comments below. And yeah, I'll see you again soon. Okay, should I wear the sweater? What do you think? I don't know. Can you see all the cat hair on it? Hopefully not from that distance. It's just a decoration of love, really. They mean well.